She was not supposed to be there. She was not supposed to care. But the moment she heard those two small voices screaming through the rain-soaked night market, something inside Zara Adeyemi moved faster than her mind could stop it. And what happened next would change every single thing about her life. It was a rainy Tuesday night in October. Busan, South Korea. The kind of night where neon lights bleed into wet cobblestones and the whole city smells like steam and street food and something electric in the air. The Jigalki night market was loud and alive, packed with bodies moving in every direction. And right in the middle of all that noise, Zara sat alone at a small plastic table outside a Pojangmaka tent. She had a bowl of food in front of her she had not touched, a cup of something warm going cold in her hands, and in her jacket pocket, pressed against her chest like a heartbeat she was borrowing, a worn photograph of a young Nigerian man with a wide smile and kind eyes. Her brother, Khalid, 22 years old, missing for 8 months. She had been in Korea for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of dead ends, closed doors, and the particular exhaustion that comes not from missing sleep, but from carrying something enormous and finding nothing on the other side of it. She had 1 more week before she had to make the hardest decision of her life. Go home empty-handed, or keep going on nothing but the refusal to stop. She picked up the photograph, looked at it the way she looked at it every night. The way you look at something you are terrified of losing even more than you have already lost it. Then she heard it. 2 voices, small voices, screaming. The crowd split and 2 small boys in white taekwondo uniforms burst through it at full speed, running like their lives depended on it, because they did. 7 years old, identical faces, identical terror, identical white dobaks soaked through with rain. They were running, and behind them 3 motorcycles rolled through the market crowd with the slow, unhurried patience of predators who already knew there was nowhere to run to. The boys were being herded, deliberately, systematically, pushed toward a dark service alley at the back of the market, a narrow opening between buildings that swallowed light completely. Zara was already moving. She did not decide to move. Her body decided. Her feet hit the wet cobblestones before the thought finished forming, and she was cutting through the crowd, pushing past bodies, her eyes locked on that alley entrance, running toward the thing everyone else was watching and walking away from. She reached the alley first. She planted both feet wide, arms out, her body a wall between 2 small boys and 3 motorcycles with their engines still running. The boys slammed into her from behind, stumbling, grabbing. She caught them both. She looked at the motorcycles. 3 men, helmets, headlights blinding her in the dark mouth of the alley. They stopped, engines idling, and for a long, suspended moment nobody moved. Zara looked at them with an expression that was not fear. It was something considerably more dangerous than fear. The specific look of a trained detective who has been undercover for 3 weeks and has just decided exactly how this moment ends. The men looked at each other, then back at her. Then the one in the middle said something in Korean. The other 2 nodded. And one by one, slowly, they reversed their bikes and disappeared into the crowd. She exhaled once. Then she turned around. 2 identical 7-year-old Korean boys were staring up at her. One pair of eyes was enormous and swimming with tears, the shock of everything spilling over completely. The other pair was dry, watchful, sharp, already reading her face the way someone much older would. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Her Korean was exactly 5 words deep. This was not one of them. The teary-eyed boy shook his head fast, then burst into full, heaving sobs. The dry-eyed boy looked at her steadily and said, in careful measured English that cost him something to produce, "The restaurant. Behind us. We can go there." She took both their hands. She ran. Now, before this story goes any further, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And if you are already here, drop a like, because this story, it is only just beginning. Because what happened in that kitchen, what those 2 little boys said to her, and what was already being set in motion in a hospital corridor that same night, none of it was coincidence. And you are going to want to see every single second of what comes next. The restaurant kitchen was all fluorescent light and stainless steel and the sharp smell of hot oil. A middle-aged cook stood at his wok with his back to them, and kept it there with the focused determination of a man who had decided he was not seeing anything tonight. Zara pulled both boys behind a tall shelving unit and crouched down to their level. The crying boy, she would learn his name was June, had his face buried in both hands, his small shoulders shaking with everything he had been holding since those motorcycles first appeared. She put one arm around him without thinking. He leaned into it immediately, completely, with the total surrender of a child who had made a decision about a person and was committing to it entirely. The other boy, Jay, stood with his back straight and his jaw set, watching the kitchen entrance. His left arm hung at a slightly wrong angle. "Your arm," Zara said quietly. He looked at her. "It is dislocated," he said. "The shoulder. I have had it before. In Taekwondo training. It will need a doctor." He said it the way someone states the weather. Just the facts. No drama. No tears. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "But that is secondary." She stared at him. He was 7 years old. And then he did something she would think about for a long time afterward. He reached out with his good arm and wrapped both small hands around her wrist. Not her hand, her wrist. He held it with a grip that was careful and complete and said something words could not say. He looked up at her with those still, watching eyes. "Thank you," he said, "for coming." 11 minutes in that kitchen. That was all it took for two boys who had never seen this woman before in their lives to decide she was someone worth holding on to. And what none of them knew yet, what none of them could have possibly known standing under those fluorescent lights with the cook's back turned and the rain still falling outside, was that someone else was already coming. Someone who had been waiting for this night far longer than any of them realized. Zara called emergency services through her translation app with one hand. Her other wrist still held in Jay's careful grip. She did not pull away. She did not rush him. She just let him hold on and made the call, and when she was done she looked down at this small serious boy and something moved in her chest that had nothing to do with the mission she came here for. They went out to the street to wait. The hospital was bright and pale and cold in the way hospitals are cold everywhere in the world. That specific fluorescent indifference that makes everything feel exposed. June needed 4 stitches above his eye from where he had fallen in the chase. He held Zara's hand through every single one of them. He gripped it tighter with each stitch and she let him grip it and she did not flinch and she did not look away from his face once. Jay's dislocated shoulder had to be relocated. He sat on the edge of the examination table and his knuckles went white and his jaw locked and he did not make a single sound. Not one. He stared at the wall and breathed through it, and when it was done he sat completely still for 3 seconds and then said, quietly, "Thank you," to the doctor, like a small diplomat completing a difficult negotiation. In the corridor afterward all 3 of them sat in a row in blue plastic chairs. June on her left, his head already finding her shoulder, the stitches fresh, his eyes going heavy. Jay on her right, sitting more upright than anyone his age should be able to manage, his arm in a fresh sling, still watching everything. Zara had her arms around both of them. She had a clipboard of forms she could not read. A translation app that was doing its best. No idea who these children were, who was coming, or what she was going to do with them if nobody ever did. She tipped her head back against the pale wall, closed her eyes for just a moment. And in that moment she looked exactly like what she was. A woman who had been carrying something alone for 8 months, who had just spent everything she had left on 2 strangers, and who was now sitting in a foreign hospital corridor at midnight holding on to 2 children who were holding on to her like she was the most solid thing in the room. That was the moment the footsteps started. Many footsteps, moving with the specific synchronized weight of people who carry authority with them wherever they go. She opened her eyes. At the far end of the corridor 10 Korean men in dark suits had stopped. They were all looking at her. And moving through them, unhurried, parting them like water parts rocks, was a small fine-boned Korean woman in a wine burgundy hanbok, silver hair in a neat bun, her face already wet before she had even reached them. She walked the full length of that corridor without slowing. She arrived in front of the three figures in the blue plastic chairs, and she looked at June against Zara's left shoulder. She looked at Jay's hand, which had moved, at some point in the last 20 minutes, from Zara's wrist to her arm, still holding. She looked at Zara's face. And then she did something that stopped every person in that corridor completely. She knelt. Chairwoman Park Sun-hee, the most feared woman in the Korean underworld, the woman who built an empire and ran it for 30 years and never once answered to anyone she did not choose, knelt on the hospital corridor floor. Her wine burgundy hanbok pooled around her like something ceremonial. Her hands pressed together at her chest. Her eyes, already wet, overflowed completely, and she did not do anything about it. She bowed her head. Behind her 10 men in dark suits looked at the floor. Then she raised her face and looked directly at Zara and spoke in Korean, low, clear, deliberate, and the man at the back of the corridor who spoke English translated in a whisper that somehow carried all the way to the chairs. You protected what is most precious to me. There are no words adequate. I will find words anyway. She reached out and took Zara's free hand in both of hers. I dreamed about you, she said. 3 nights ago. A woman coming through a door of fire who was not burned. Holding my grandson's hands. The corridor went very still. June lifted his head from Zara's shoulder. His large dark eyes were wide and certain and completely awake. We dreamed it too, he said. Both of us. 3 nights in a row. The same dream. The red door. The fire. The woman who walked through and was not burned. Jay, from Zara's right, his hand still on her arm, his voice as steady as it had been all night. We told Halmione in the morning. She said it was significant. Zara looked at the woman kneeling before her. She looked at the twins. She looked at the 10 men at the end of the corridor. She looked back at the woman whose hands were wrapped around hers. Who are you? She asked. Chairwoman Park rose from her knees with the slow, unhurried grace of a woman who kneels only when she chooses to and rises the exact same way. She looked at Zara for a long moment, the look of someone who has already decided everything and is simply letting the other person catch up. I am your mother-in-law, she said. Zara's breath stopped. You have not met my son yet, Chairwoman Park said. But you will. And somewhere across the city, in a building full of men who answered to him, with no idea that his entire life had just been rearranged by a woman in a hospital corridor he had never been to, holding his sons, being claimed by his mother, and that by the time he came home nothing would ever be the same again. The car ride to the estate was the quietest loud thing Zara had ever experienced. No one was speaking, but everything was being said. The vehicle was black and long and immaculate, the kind of car that does not exist in the world of ordinary people. Zara sat in the back with both boys pressed against her. June on her left, already surrendering to sleep with the complete physical trust of a child who has decided a person is safe and is using every available inch of them to prove it. His small head on her arm. His breathing evening out within minutes. Jay sat on her right. He fought sleep longer. He sat upright despite everything his body had been through. The chase, the fall, the dislocated shoulder, the hospital. And he watched the city move past the window with those careful ancient eyes. His good hand rested close to her arm. Not quite touching, but available, present. Then, quietly, into the moving dark of the car, he spoke. He cried when our mother left, Jay said, not looking at her, just stating it. The way he stated everything, like he had already processed it completely and was now simply delivering the result. He has not cried in front of anyone since. Zara looked at him. He cried tonight, Jay said. In front of you. That means he trusts you. A pause. The city lights moved across his face. I trust you too, he said. I decided in the kitchen. His eyes were closing now despite everything he was doing to stop them. I thought you should know that, he said. And he was asleep. Zara sat in that dark, moving car with both boys against her and Chairwoman Park directly across from her, watching her with those knowing eyes that had already seen the end of the story and were simply waiting for Zara to arrive at it. And Zara felt the full specific weight of what had just been placed in her hands without her permission and without her planning and with a completeness that left no room for arguing about it. She looked down at June's sleeping face, at Jay's hand still resting near her arm even in sleep, at the photograph of Khalid still in her jacket pocket against her chest. She came to Korea looking for her brother. She had not come looking for any of this. The estate appeared through the rain like something out of a different century. Stone driveway, high iron gates swinging open at the approach of the car. A house that was grand the way old things are grand. Not flashy, not performing itself, just enormous and certain and cold. Beautiful formal gardens. Architecture that had been standing for decades. The exterior of great wealth and longer history. But cold. The kind of cold that had nothing to do with the October air. The cold of a house that had been running on function alone for a very long time. Everything worked. Everything was managed. Nothing was alive in it the way houses are alive when the people inside them are fully present. 14 months since Sohee left. 14 months since she signed the papers, took her things, and never once called the boys who still had her face in their memories and her absence in the space she left behind. 14 months of Park Juno holding everything together alone. The empire, the boys, himself, with the sealed controlled efficiency of a man who has decided that closing every door inside himself is the same thing as protecting the people on the other side of them. He was wrong about that, but no one had been able to tell him yet. Zara was shown to a guest room. It was beautiful and impersonal in equal measure. The room of a house that knew how to accommodate people without knowing how to welcome them. She sat on the edge of the bed and took out Khalid's photograph and held it in both hands and thought about the strange, impossible specific reality of this day. Then Chairwoman Park appeared in the doorway. She had brought food. Real food, not sent up by a staff member, not arranged on a tray and delivered. She had brought it herself because she was Chairwoman Park and she did things herself when they mattered. Warm, prepared, served properly. She set it on the small table by the window. "Sit," she said. "Eat, then sleep. Tomorrow we talk." It was not a suggestion, but it was the kindest thing anyone had said to Zara in 3 weeks. Morning came cold and clear. The formal dining room. Tea. Chairwoman Park sat across from her and asked questions the way people ask questions when they genuinely want to know. Not performing curiosity, not making conversation. She wanted the real version, and she had 60 years of reading people behind her eyes, and she would know immediately if she was getting anything less. So Zara gave her the real version. She was a detective. She was in Korea undercover working a case, but the reason she was really here, the reason that had kept her moving when every official channel told her to stop, was personal. Her younger brother, Khalid, 22 years old, taken 8 months ago. She had a photograph. She placed it on the table between them. Chairwoman Park looked at it for a long time. "You came alone," she said. "There was nobody else to come," Zara said. Something in the older woman's face settled, the specific quiet settling of a woman who has already decided something and has just heard the final piece that makes the decision permanent. "You will stay here while you look for him," Chairwoman Park said. Not a question, not an offer, a fact being delivered. "I am a stranger," Zara said. Chairwoman Park looked at her with those eyes that had already seen the end of this. "You were a stranger for approximately 4 hours," she said. "That time has passed." Then June appeared at the table in his school uniform, sat down without being invited, poured himself tea, and began talking about a card trick he was learning with the energy of someone who had never once in his life waited to be included in a conversation before joining it. And Jay appeared, took one look at the two women, sat down with his homework, said nothing for 20 minutes. Then, without looking up, his pencil still moving across the page, he spoke. "Our mother left," he said, 14 months ago. She decided she did not want this life anymore. She signed the papers. She took her things. A pause. "She has not called us once." He turned a page. "Our father does not talk about it. He carries it alone because he believes that is what protecting us looks like." Another pause. "He is wrong. It does not protect us. It only means he carries it alone." He looked up, directly at Zara. The full assessment. Dry, steady, certain. Some people leave, he said. And some people stay. The ones who stay are the ones who matter. He held her gaze for one more moment. I think you are the kind that stays, he said. I decided in the kitchen. I thought you should know. He went back to his homework. And Zara sat very still with her tea going cold in front of her, and the weight of a 7-year-old's certainty pressing on her chest like something she had not earned yet but was already being held responsible for. She did not know it then. But Jay was never wrong about people. Not once. And somewhere in this city, in a facility outside Busan that Zara had been circling for 3 weeks without finding, her brother was still alive. She just needed one more piece. She had no idea it was already sitting in this house. She had no idea it had been sitting in this house for 6 months. And she had absolutely no idea that the man who had it was coming home tonight. At midnight. The house was quiet by the time midnight came. The boys were in bed. The staff had gone. The only light still burning in the whole estate was the one coming from the dining room where Zara sat at the long table with her notes spread around her. Her laptop open. Her cup of tea going cold the way it always did when she was deep enough inside the work to forget it existed. She was going over everything again. Every name. Every date. Every dead end. The photograph of Khalad at the top of the page like a North Star she kept navigating back to when the trail went dark. She did not hear the car. She did not hear the gates. She heard the front door, the specific weighted sound of a door that belongs to someone opening it the way they always open it, without thinking, because this is their house and every room in it answers to them. Footsteps in the entrance hall. Confident. Controlled. Unhurried. The footsteps of a man who has never once walked into a room and wondered whether he belonged in it. He appeared in the dining room doorway. Park Juno. 34 years old. Dark suit, slightly loosened at the collar, the precise controlled exhaustion of a man who has been running something enormous all day and is running it still even standing in his own home at midnight. Sharp jaw, careful eyes. The face of someone who has trained himself so completely that even the surprise on it arrives managed. He stopped. He looked at the woman at his table. A black woman. In his house. At his dining room table. In the middle of the night with papers spread everywhere and a laptop open like she had been here long enough to get comfortable. His expression did not break. But something behind it moved. Who is this? He said. Not to her. To the room. To the air. To the specific universe that had apparently decided to rearrange his house without consulting him. From the kitchen doorway, arriving with the precise timing of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this moment and had positioned herself accordingly, Chairwoman Park's voice came through calm and clear and completely unbothered. Your wife. The silence that followed that statement was not empty. It was completely full. Full of Juno turning to look at his mother. Full of his mother looking back at him with the serene composure of a woman who expected every single thing about his reaction and had already prepared for all of it. Full of Zara finding her teacup and developing a sudden intense interest in its contents. What followed was not loud. Juno was never loud. Loud was not how he was built, and it was not how he fought, and it was not how he made things land. He was precise. He was cold. He was thorough in the specific devastating way of someone who has learned that a perfectly placed word does more damage than any amount of volume. He said things in Korean that Zara could not understand but that Chairwoman Park received with the absolute stillness of a woman standing in weather she had forecasted. He spoke about boundaries, about decisions being made without him, about strangers in his house and his home and his life. About the fact that whatever his mother had decided in a hospital corridor in the middle of the night was not something he was going to simply walk into his dining room and accept. Chairwoman Park let him finish. Then she said quietly, with the weight of someone who has been saving a particular sentence for the right moment and has just decided this is it. Your wife did not die, she said. She divorced you. The room went completely still. She chose to leave, Chairwoman Park said. That door is closed. This one is open. Juno looked at his mother. His jaw was tight. His eyes said everything his voice was no longer producing. And then from the dining room doorway, appearing in pajamas with the specific timing of a child who has excellent hearing and even better instincts, J. He stood there in his pajamas with his arms still in its sling and his face carrying the same complete composure it always carried, and he looked at his father with the patient certainty of someone stating something that should already be obvious. "She is staying, Appa," he said. "We already decided." Juno looked at his son. Jay looked back. 7 years old. Unblinking. The expression of someone who has stated a fact and is simply waiting for the adults in the room to catch up to it. Juno looked at Zara. Zara looked at her teacup with the focused dedication of a woman who had decided that the pattern on the ceramic was the most fascinating thing she had encountered in Korea. Juno turned. He walked out of the dining room. The door did not slam. A beat of silence. Then Jay, still in the doorway, observing the closed door with the evaluative expression of someone conducting a post-situation analysis. That went well. Normally he slams the door. He turned and walked back upstairs without another word. Chairwoman Park picked up her teacup. She took a slow, deliberate sip. She looked at Zara over the rim of it with the warm, private satisfaction of a woman watching something she planned coming together exactly as planned. She was smiling. If you are watching this and you have not subscribed yet, right now, hit that button. Because what is coming next in the story is the part that is going to break you open in the best possible way. The part where this man who has sealed every door inside himself starts standing outside one specific door every single morning and cannot make himself knock. Do not miss it. 3 days followed. 3 days of Juno being professionally civil in the way that is somehow colder than actual coldness. Good morning at breakfast, good night at the end of the evening, one inquiry about whether the guest room was adequate, and then nothing. The sealed, controlled efficiency of a man who has made a decision and is maintaining it with everything he has. Zara worked. She kept her head down and her notes organized and her focus where it needed to be, on Kalad, on the trail, on the 3 weeks of nothing she was trying to turn into something before her time ran out. But the boys were everywhere. June was with her at every available opportunity with the devoted, focused energy of someone who had appointed himself to a mission and was not going to be distracted from it. He was teaching her Korean with the enthusiasm of a child who has discovered that watching someone learn something is almost as satisfying as learning it yourself. He celebrated every small improvement like it was a major international achievement. He was terrible at patience and extraordinary at encouragement, and the combination of those two things made him the best and most exhausting teacher she had ever had. Jay corrected her pronunciation with precise regularity and absolutely zero warmth. But she had already learned that zero warmth from Jay was its own language, and what it was saying was, "I am paying attention to you. I am investing in you. This is what that looks like from me." Chairwoman Park was weaving her into the rhythm of the house so quietly and so skillfully that Zara kept almost not noticing it was happening. Tea in the morning appeared at her elbow. Dinner was together at the table. Small questions about her preferences that got filed and acted on. The gentle, specific authority of a woman building a place for someone while making it look like simple hospitality. And Juno moved through all of it like a man walking through whether he refuses to acknowledge. Present, functional, and sealed completely shut. Until the morning of day 4. Zara was in the garden on the bench where she did her best thinking. Her notes spread around her in the organized chaos of a detective who knows where everything is even when it looks like she doesn't. Kalad's photograph visible among the papers. The October morning cold and still around her. Footsteps on the stone path. She looked up. Juno stopped when he saw her. A brief internal recalibration, there and gone in a fraction of a second. Then he came and sat on the other end of the bench because this was his bench in his garden, and he was not going to be displaced from it by anyone. They sat in silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that exists between two people who are both aware of each other but have not yet decided what to do about it. Then he said, "What are you doing in Korea?" Not quite a question. An opening. The first one he had offered her in 4 days. Zara looked at him for a moment. She made a decision. She told him everything. Not the cover. Not the case file version. The real version, her brother, 8 months, Lagos to Busan, 3 weeks of nothing, the photograph she carried everywhere because putting it away felt like giving up. She took it out and placed it on the bench between them. Juno looked at it. He went very still. And then he said 4 words that stopped Zara's entire world. I know this face. The garden went completely silent. Not the natural silence of a cold October morning. The specific suspended silence of a moment where something enormous has just shifted and neither person has moved yet because moving would make it real. Zara did not breathe. He has been in a holding facility outside the city for 6 months, Juno said. His voice was the same controlled directness it always was. Precise, operational, delivering information the way he delivered everything, without decoration. He was taken in error. He was not the target. I have been tracking the network that took him for a separate reason entirely. I have his exact location. Zara was completely still. He is alive, Juno said. He looked at her when he said it. Directly, holding nothing back. He is not well treated. But he is alive. 8 months. She had been looking for 8 months. 3 weeks in Korea with nothing but dead ends and a photograph and the refusal to go home without him. And the answer had been sitting in this house. In this garden. On this bench. 6 months already known by the man she had been living under the same roof as for 4 days while neither of them knew what the other was carrying. The garden held the weight of that. Then from the doorway of the house, appearing the way June always appeared, in the specific place and at the specific moment that mattered most, like a child with internal radar calibrated entirely to love June. In his school uniform. His large dark eyes moving between his father's face and Zara's face and the photograph on the bench between them and back to his father. He looked at Juno for a long moment. Then, with the full weight of 7 years of loving his father and knowing him completely pressing through 2 words. Appa. Fix it. Something moved in Juno's face. The first crack. The first thing getting through the managed surface since the night he walked into his dining room and found his life rearranged. He looked at his son. This small certain boy in his school uniform standing in the doorway with his whole heart visible, and something behind his eyes shifted permanently. I will move the timeline, he said. The operations room became their space. It happened without anyone deciding it would. There was a long central table and maps on the walls and printed intelligence and satellite images and timelines and 2 people who came at the same problem from completely different directions. A detective who had been tracking a missing person for 8 months with nothing but precision and refusal, and an empire builder who had been tracking the same network for 6 months with resources and inside knowledge that she had never had access to. They fit together in that room in a way that surprised both of them. She brought the analytical precision of someone trained to find the thing that does not want to be found. He brought the structural knowledge of a man who understood the architecture of this world from the inside because he had been living inside it his entire adult life. They argued, productively and specifically, the friction of 2 intelligent people who had stopped managing their disagreement and started using it instead. She pushed on his assumptions. He pushed back on hers. They reached conclusions in that room that neither of them would have reached alone, and both of them knew it. New tension arrived every night with the intelligence updates. New complications. New variables. The network was more layered than either of them had originally mapped. There were moving pieces that required constant recalibration. And through all of it they stayed at that table. 2 people bent over the same maps, drinking cold coffee, rebuilding the plan every time something shifted it. On the 4th night she saw it. Jay had fallen asleep on the sofa in the corner of the operations room sometime around 11. He did it occasionally, came to find his father, stayed too long, surrendered to sleep in the closest available horizontal space. He was curled on his side with his good arm under his head, his sling resting against the sofa cushion, his face finally, completely relaxed in a way it almost never was when he was awake. Juno did not stop mid-sentence. He did not make a production of it. He simply reached, without looking, and took the folded blanket from the back of the nearest chair and laid it over his son with the automatic certainty of someone who has done this specific thing so many times it has become part of the body's memory rather than the mind's. His hand returned to the map before Zara had fully registered what she had seen. She filed it. She said nothing, but she felt it land somewhere deep and permanent inside her and stay there. On the seventh night, she brought him coffee without asking. She had been watching how he took it for days, one black, one sugar, the cup held from the side, not the handle when he was reading. And she made it exactly right and set it beside the map without interrupting what he was saying. He took it without looking up. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. But the way he said them was different from the way he said other things. Slightly less managed. Slightly more present. Like something was beginning to come through the surface that had been sealed for so long. On the 9th night, they finished each other's sentences. Not performing it. Not even noticing it until it had already happened several times, and they both went quiet for a moment with the specific quality of 2 people realizing simultaneously that something has changed and neither of them knows exactly when it changed, but it has changed completely. On the 11th night, Chairwoman Park appeared in the kitchen doorway at 2 in the morning. She had come down for water, or she had come down because she knew what she would find and wanted to see it with her own eyes. She stood in the doorway and looked through the open operations room door at the 2 figures bent over the same map. The closeness between them, the quality of the space, the specific charged proximity of people who have stopped measuring the distance between themselves because measuring it would require acknowledging it and acknowledging it would require deciding something. She stood there for a moment. Then she went back to bed with the warm private satisfaction of a woman who made a decision in a hospital corridor and is watching it become exactly what she knew it would become. She was smiling in the dark. Dawn on day 12 came cold and precise, and everything happened fast. Juno's men. Zara's intelligence. Months of tracking from 2 different directions finally converging into a single targeted extraction that moved at first light with the efficiency of people who have planned something so thoroughly that execution becomes almost simple. Zara did not sleep that night. She sat in the operations room with the final plan in front of her and Claude's photograph beside it, and she breathed through every hour between midnight and the moment the first car left the estate gates. By 7 in the morning the message came through. He was in the car. By 9 the car was coming up the estate driveway. She was at the front door before it stopped. She did not know how she got there. She had been in the operations room, and then she was in the corridor, and then she was at the front door, and the car was slowing on the stone driveway, and the door was opening and her brother stepped out. Thin, hollowed at the cheeks. The frame of a young man who had not been properly fed in 6 months. His clothes were wrong. His movements were careful in the specific way of someone whose body has been through something it is still accounting for. But his face, his eyes, they found her immediately across the driveway with the specific warmth and enormous relief of someone who has been somewhere very dark for a very long time and has just walked back into the light and found the person who never stopped looking. She ran. She crossed the driveway and she grabbed him and he grabbed back and they held each other in the middle of the stone driveway with everything they had. Not beautifully, not performed, not composed. Raw and complete and entirely real. The specific physical truth of 2 people separated by 8 months of fear who have found each other on the other side of it and cannot yet believe it is actually over. Behind them in the doorway, June had his hand pressed flat against his heart. Already crying. The tears running freely down his round, soft face with the complete, unashamed openness that was the most June thing about him. Chairwoman Park stood beside him with her hands pressed together and her eyes streaming, and she was not doing anything about it either. Jay stood on June's other side, watching, processing, reading the scene with those ancient, careful eyes. When Zara and Claude finally separated, when they finally loosened their grip enough to look at each other's faces and confirm with their own eyes what their hands already knew, Jay walked across the driveway. He walked up to Claude and stood before him and looked at him with the full assessment. Reading him, deciding. Then he extended his hand. "Welcome," Jay said, formally, gravely, with the specific weight of a 7-year-old opening a door that does not open for everyone. Claude looked down at the small extended hand. Then he shook it, with every ounce of seriousness the gesture deserved. Like he understood exactly what was being offered and was not going to treat it as anything less than what it was. Jay nodded once. Admission complete. And at the top of the driveway steps, Juno stood alone and watched Zara with her brother, and something happened in his face that had never happened in the entire story before that moment. The managed surface went entirely, completely unguarded. Just for a moment. Just long enough for everything underneath it to be visible and real and present. The warmth, the feeling, The man of enormous warmth who had decided warmth was a liability, standing at the top of his own front steps with that decision quietly falling apart. He did not move. He did not speak. But his face said everything it had been holding. And Zara, even across the driveway with her brother's arms still around her, felt it. Khalad was shown to a guest room on the second floor of the estate, warm, quiet, with clean sheets and a window that looked out over the formal garden. After everything he had been through, it felt like another world entirely. It was Ife who brought him water. She was Chairwoman Park's personal assistant, 26 years old, composed and warm in equal measure, with warm medium brown skin and dark almond eyes that carried both Korean and Nigerian in them. Her name was Yoruba. It meant love. Her mother had chosen it deliberately. She set the glass on his nightstand. She was turning to leave when he said it. Ife, that name is Yoruba. She stopped, turned back slowly. Yes, she said. I am from Lagos, Khalad said, his wide warm smile finding its way back to his face for the first time in 6 months. She sat down, and they talked. 3 days after Khalad came home, Chairwoman Park said it over morning tea with the specific tone of a woman who has been deciding how to deliver something and has finally decided. So he called yesterday. The table went still. June's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Jay's pencil stopped moving across his homework without him looking up. Zara set her cup down quietly. The whole breakfast table held its breath in the specific way of people who have all just been handed the same weight simultaneously. She is coming tomorrow, Chairwoman Park said. She heard that someone is here. She wants to see the boys. Nobody spoke for a moment. June put his fork down. He pushed his chair back slightly and looked at the table with his large soft eyes, carrying something too complicated for a 7-year-old to have to carry. He did not cry. He just went quiet in the particular way that was more painful than crying because it meant he was holding it instead of releasing it. Jay turned a page of his homework. His pencil started moving again. His face said absolutely nothing, which meant everything. Zara stood up quietly. She took her cup to the kitchen and began washing dishes that did not need washing because she needed something to do with her hands in a room that had just changed, and she was not the one whose pain had the right to fill it. The following afternoon Sohee arrived. Black car. Precise dark clothing. Beautiful composed face of a woman who had rehearsed this arrival in the mirror until it looked effortless. She came through the front door and the estate received her with the quiet of a house that remembers everything. At the bottom of the staircase, Jay was waiting. He had not been sent. Nobody had told him to be there. He had simply decided, the way Jay decided everything, deliberately and completely and with full understanding of what he was doing, that this was where he needed to be at this moment. He stood in his school uniform at the foot of the stairs, his hands at his sides, his eyes on her face. So he looked at her son. Something in her composed, beautiful face shifted. The specific complexity of a woman looking at a child she left. A child who has grown 14 months worth of growing in her absence. A child who is looking back at her with eyes that have learned things she does not know about. Jaya, she said. The nickname. Soft. Careful. He did not answer to it. He simply continued looking at her with those dry, watchful eyes. Patient. Waiting for himself to be ready to speak. Then he spoke. You left, he said. You signed the papers. You took your things. You did not call. Not once in 14 months. Not on our birthdays. Not when June had his tonsils out. Not once. The entrance hall held every word. You do not get to come back because someone else is here who stayed, he said. That is not how it works. Sohee's composed face was having difficulty staying composed. You do not get to decide you want to be here because someone else showed you what here looks like when a person chooses to stay, Jay said. He looked at her for one more moment. The full final assessment. Then he turned and walked up the stairs and did not look back. In the sitting room, Chairwoman Park received Sohee with the composed graciousness of a woman for whom graciousness is a precision instrument and does not require warmth to function. Two women. The managed formality of a conversation whose outcome has already been determined. Sohee asked about the boys. Chairwoman Park told her about the boys, thoroughly, honestly, with the specific detail of a grandmother who has been present for every single moment. And then so he asked the one question she had come here to ask. The question she could not have asked anyone else. The question she needed answered before she could leave properly. Is she good to them? Chairwoman Park looked at her for a long moment. Then she told her everything. The hospital corridor. The kitchen. For stitches and a dislocated shoulder. The way June, who had not slept easily since she left, pressed his whole body against this woman's side and slept like he was safe. The way Jay, who had not reached for anyone in 14 months, wrapped both hands around her wrist in a kitchen and held on and called it trust. The drawing labeled our family. The Korean lessons. The garden mornings. The operations room. The brother found alive because this woman had not stopped looking and this house had not stopped helping. She told her what her grandsons were now. What warmth had come back into the house. What had put it there and chosen to stay. So he listened to every word. When Chairwoman Park finished, the sitting room was quiet. So he sat in the warm lamplight with the answer she came for. She nodded once. She stood. She picked up her bag. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. She walked through the entrance hall without looking at the staircase. She got into the black car. She did not return. That evening Juno came home and his mother told him what had happened and he listened with the full weight of a man receiving something that costs. Then he went to the garden. Zara was already there. On the bench. The autumn air sharp around her. The garden going gold at the edges with the season changing. He came and sat beside her. Not at the other end. Closer than that. The distance of a man who has made a quiet internal decision and is acting on it. He was silent for a while. Then, "I was not kind to you," he said. "When you arrived. I was not kind." "No," she said. Simply, without softening it for him. "I was afraid," he said. "That is not an excuse. I am telling you what it was." "I know what it was," Zara said. "I need you to know," he said. "That it was not about you. What you are. Where you are from. None of it was that. It was entirely me and the things I had closed and the fact that something arriving openly in my house made me." He stopped. Then, terrified. That is the word. Zara looked at him. The real him. The one underneath the managed surface that she had been watching come through slowly for weeks in operations rooms and garden mornings, and the particular way he covered his sleeping son with a blanket without stopping his sentence. "You matter," he said, "as a person. To the people in this house. To my sons who dreamed about you 3 nights before they met you and have been correct about everything since. To my mother who does not kneel for anyone." He held her gaze. "I should have said that from the beginning. I am saying it now." Zara was quiet for a moment. She looked at the garden. Then she looked at him. "I have choices," she said. "I want you to understand that. I am not here because I have nowhere else to be. I have choices and I see what this house is. I see what your sons are. I see what you are, the actual version. The one who covers his son with a blanket without stopping mid-sentence. The one who moved a timeline because a stranger's brother needed to come home." She held his gaze steady. "And I am still here," she said. Something in his face went all the way open. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. Weeks passed. The house filled slowly and permanently with something it had been missing for 14 months. Khalad's laugh came back first. The wide, generous, full-throated laugh that made every room it entered larger. He and Jay ran Korean vocabulary drills at the breakfast table with the competitive focus of 2 people who have both decided winning matters. He and June did card tricks in the garden. And he and Ife were becoming something that did not have a name yet but was moving toward one with the quiet, unhurried certainty of 2 people who already know what they have found and are simply letting it arrive. Zara filed her reclassification request. The honest path. Not the easy one. She sent it before she could argue herself out of it, and then she sat in the garden with her tea and breathed through the waiting. Then one morning June appeared in her doorway in his pajamas carrying something in both hands with the ceremonial air of someone delivering something significant. He opened a drawing on her bed between them. A crayon house with open windows and yellow light coming through them. Figures inside. He had labeled everyone. Their names in his careful child's handwriting, each one placed with intention. At the bottom in slightly larger letters, "Our family." Zara held it. She looked at it for a long time. "That is for you," June said. "So you know what you have." Her face went completely open. No management. No composure. Just the full real thing. "Also," June said, moving to his second agenda item with the focused efficiency of someone who came here with a list. "Appa has been standing outside your door in the morning. 5 mornings. Not knocking. Just standing there. Then going away." Zara stared at him. "He asked me yesterday what you liked for breakfast," June said patiently. "That means he is going to knock today." He climbed off the bed. He went to the door. He paused. "He is going to knock," he said again. "Just so you know." He left. Zara sat in the quiet of her room with the drawing in her hands. And then 3 deliberate knocks at her door. She opened it. Juno. In dark home clothing, his hair slightly less precise than usual, holding 2 ceramic coffee cups. 1 black with 1 sugar. Her order. Learned by watching. He looked at her with the fully visible expression. The open one. The face of a man who has been standing outside a door for 5 mornings and has finally decided that what is on the other side of it is worth the knocking. "I thought," he said, "that we could have coffee in the garden." "Yes," she said. They walked down the corridor together toward the morning light coming through the windows in long gold panels across the floor. The garden door opened. The bench. The October air. 2 cups of coffee and the specific warm silence of 2 people who have arrived somewhere together and both know it. December came. Ngozi Adeyemi walked through the arrivals gate at Gimhe Airport with a rolling suitcase, a separate bag that smelled of spices through 3 layers of packaging, and the bearing of a woman arriving somewhere she intended to understand completely before she left. She held both her children in the middle of a Korean airport and cried the full, completely unashamed way of a woman putting down something she had been carrying for 8 months. In the car, she asked questions for 45 minutes without stopping. At the end of them, she looked at her daughter and said, "He sounds like a man who needed someone to show him the door." "That is exactly right," Zara said. "And you showed him. We showed each other." Ngozi looked at her daughter's face. Saw something there she had not seen in a very long time. Something different from strong and different from determined. Happy. At the estate chairwoman Park came down 2 steps to meet Ngozi in the middle and took both her hands and said, "Your son is eating properly now." And Ngozi said, "I can see that. You did that." And Chairwoman Park said, "We all did it. Come inside. I made something." And Ngozi said, "That is exactly the right instinct." And they went inside together holding hands, already talking, and never really stopped. The December dinner table held 2 kitchens and 2 grandmothers and 2 languages and a third one growing in the middle. Ngozi's groundnut soup at one end. Chairwoman Park's mayak guk with ginger at the other. Khalad telling a story that made the whole room lean in by the 3rd sentence. Ife watching him with the face of someone watching what they love doing what it does best. June crying happy tears, and when asked why, "It is just nice. Everything is just really nice." Jay formally shaking Khalad's hand at the end of the meal and sitting back down and finishing his rice. And under the table Juno's hand finding Zara's. Holding it. Chairwoman Park seeing it and putting her spoon down for a moment and feeling something enormous and quiet move through her. "Halmiani," June said. "You stopped eating." "I was thinking," she said, "about how full this house is. It was not always this full." June looked around the table. Did his accounting. Then, it got full fast. "The best things do," Chairwoman Park said. That night in the December garden Juno said, "Zara Adeyemi, will you marry me? Directly. No rebuilding it twice." And she said yes. 1 word. No rebuild. And he pulled her in and she went and they stood in the cold garden holding each other while inside the house June's voice rose and doors opened and closed and the estate held all of it. Outside in the December garden, Zara had just said yes. Inside the estate, Khalad was already on one knee. He had not planned it for this night, but something about the way the whole house felt that evening, full and warm and certain, made him know that this was exactly the right moment. Ife, he said quietly, holding the small box open in both hands, looking up at her. Your name means love. I think your mother knew something about you long before I did. She looked down at him, her composed face completely undone. Yes, she whispered. Spring came. The garden transformed with white and gold flowers. 2 ceremonies under the same archway, Zara and Juno, then Khalad and Ife. June and Jay walked her down the aisle. Their request, delivered over breakfast with Jay's written key points and June's illustrations. A presentation divided according to their strengths. June on her left holding flowers at exactly the right height. His round, soft face bright and already tearful with happiness. Jay on her right with his hands clasped behind his back. The bearing of a personal guard who has appointed himself to a role and is treating it with total seriousness. At the end of the aisle, Jay looked up at his father and said, She stayed. I told you from the beginning. She is the kind that stays. Juno's hand on his son's head, his throat moving, unable to speak for a moment. June looked up at Zara. Our family, he said. Our family, she said. Khalad and Ife stood together. His smile was the widest thing in the garden. Her composure was completely gone, replaced by something that matched him perfectly, warmth meeting warmth. Jay stood up without being asked and shook Khalad's hand one final time. Admitted. Permanent. Family. And in the front row, Chairwoman Park and Ngozi wept openly and completely without doing anything about it, and Chairwoman Park thought about a hospital corridor and a woman she knelt before and a dream about fire and a door and a woman who walked through it without being burned and found a family on the other side. She had been right. She was always right. That evening, Zara and Juno stood in the garden after everything was done and the house behind them was lit and warm and full of sound. Tell me something, he said. Anything. Something I don't know yet. She looked at the night sky. She thought about her father. He used to say, she said, that home is not where you are from. It is what you build with the people who show up. His hand in hers. The warm, certain weight of it. He was right, Juno said. He was usually right, she said. Like Jay. Do not tell Jay that. He will add it to the written record. She laughed. The real one. The full one. And behind them the house was alive and warm and completely full. The grandmother who knelt in a hospital corridor, the brother who was found, the woman who came to Korea looking for one thing and found everything, the 2 small boys who dreamed about a woman walking through fire and were never wrong about a single thing they decided. All of it built with showing up, built with staying, built with the irreplaceable decision to run toward instead of away, made on a rainy Tuesday night in October by a woman who did not come looking for any of this. And found all of it anyway. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell, and never miss a story like this one. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Share this video with someone you love because some stories deserve to be felt by more than one heart. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one.